This breakout session on curricular innovations for the post-2020 clerkship. It is rocket science. I'm Shireen Madani. I'm one of the UMEC members, and I'm just helping to host and moderate this session. Renata, I see you here. I see some familiar names, but if everybody would like to just introduce themselves in the chat, that would be great. You can kind of say where you are and what your role is. And we decided ahead of this session, we're going to use first names. So everybody feel comfortable. This is APGO. We're friendly here. Everybody feel comfortable using first names. And I'm going to ask Sarah, Jessica, and Lorene to introduce themselves and start the session.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you guys for joining us on a Friday afternoon. And hopefully some of you are seeing some sunshine somewhere where you are. I think I can say for all three of us at our various places in North Carolina are not seeing much sunshine today. But my name is Lorene Temming. I'm an MFM and the clerkship director at Atrium Health, which is a regional campus of the Wake Forest School of Medicine for the third year clerkship. And I met these lovely ladies. I think we all were on the interview trail for fellowship at the same time, although I know I met SDK earlier than that on residency interviews, and we're all clerkship directors. I'll let each of them introduce themselves as well.
Jess, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm Jess McPherson, and I am at Wake Forest. So Lorene and I'm the clerkship director at Wake Forest. So Lorene and I work really close together because it's the same group of students. I'm also maternal fetal medicine, and Sarah and I did fellowship together, which is where we met. And us three have all kind of continued to work together and collaborate since we're all here in North Carolina doing the same work.
And like the other two have so eloquently said, I'm Sarah. Some people call me SDK as well. I respond to either. I'm also an MFM, and I'm the clerkship director at Duke.
Yeah, so we wanted to originally thought about this workshop based on the kind of work that the three of us did together in the setting of the 2020 pandemic beginning. First of all, we don't have any disclosures. Our goal was to discuss what we've done, but to share resources and gather resources from you all for building a clerkship curriculum. The stuff we're going to reference, most of it is free, open source, not copyrighted, and available on the internet. We do refer to some textbooks, one in particular that we use, and that resource is generally available through institutional medical libraries. We have no affiliation with any of these textbooks or sources that we're going to mention, however. So the goal of this workshop is really to leverage resources to have a productive curriculum for our med students in this new era of Zoom and non-Zoom and all the things we're dealing with on a daily basis these days. We want to talk about kind of what our challenges were that led us to each of us revising our clerkship didactics. And then I think depending on the size of the group, we'll either do breakout rooms or just have some group discussion around challenges that you all have faced, and then discuss how we approached those challenges and some of the resources we used, and then talk about how that could potentially be integrated into any of your clerkships. Sorry, I'm moving windows around. I got too many things happening. All right, so I'll pass it off to Jess.
So we all, everyone here I know is involved in medical student, resident, fellow teaching. And we all know the sort of traditional ways and the ways that we have taught our learners, teaching on the wards in the clinical setting, and traditionally using just PowerPoint lectures and then small group discussions to teach. I think more recently, there's been a big push and actually some data out there to support that perhaps case-based learning is a better way to engage students. I think we've seen that they enjoy it more and they actually learn more. In addition, the idea of a flipped classroom, or actually having the students do the teaching and us, the faculty, acting as facilitators more than teachers.
But then COVID happened. And I don't have to tell this group that sort of threw a wrench in everyone's plans. And, my guess is that for all of you all, just like it was for us, pretty much within like a week, they pulled our students off the wards and said, okay, go. What are you going to do now? I know at Duke, we moved up our spring break a couple weeks. So we had a little more time to scramble, but honestly, we all had to sort of make this pivot, one of our favorite pandemic words, quickly to things that were virtual learning. We had to figure out, how are we going to teach students virtually? How are we going to connect with them and help ensure that they're really getting this material? And then as the pandemic evolved and vaccines came in, and then we had waves, and we had to sort of figure out what's going to be the balance between in-person learning and virtual learning, and when are we going to be back together, and when are we going to stay apart, and how are we going to create curriculum that can do both those things really easily, or could do them at the same time for students who are, at a different site, or for students who are out on like COVID quarantine. And so that sort of was something that all of us struggled with.
And against that backdrop, kind of simultaneously, I think we all have experienced the years of racial inequity and systemic racism in this country kind of coming to a head in the spring and summer of 2020 with George Floyd's murder and the nationwide protests against police, and sort of this increased awareness of things I think, we all were already aware of, but just really facing the racial reckoning that's necessary in our society right now, and looking at and seeing all the healthcare inequities that already exist being exacerbated by COVID. And certainly, I think for many of us, certainly for me, I think it's just a real pause point to look at how those things might be impacting our students and to how we address them in the clerkship. I feel like students these days have a much better grasp of those things than certainly I did as a medical student. And I think it is incorporated into the first 2 years of curriculum quite well. And I think, certainly many of our institutions have done a good job trying to build that into the third year clerkship. But for us, I think really a point of focus of incorporating that into our curriculum to improve representation and address our diverse groups of learners, racial and ethnic diversity, as well as just diversity in how people learn, and to hope that in so doing, that makes a small dent in addressing the larger healthcare inequities that exist. So I can't see my slides here. Yeah, so we were just going to have a small group discussion. I think with the number of people we have, if I'm correct, I think we're less than 10 people. We could just talk in the room kind of about what your current mode of clerkship didactics is, and if that's any different than the way that it was prior to COVID in terms of the format and when they happen, and if they happen face-to-face or virtually, and then any particular challenges that are existing for your clerkship didactics, and any ways that you all might already have that you're addressing these challenges or addressing healthcare inequity in your clerkship didactics. So I don't know if anybody in the audience wants to unmute and share.
So I can tell you, I'll get us started if that's okay, Lorene.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We use APGO resources, and so we use the clinical cases, the APGO clinical cases, which of course are tagged to the educational topics, and we also use the U-Wise questions. And so we've kind of adapted the clinical cases to a flipped classroom kind of model where the students work through the cases on their own ahead of time, and then we come together as a small group. For us, with the way our groups are, it's usually one faculty member with anywhere from 5 to 7 students is kind of how it works out. And we really try to use that as a basis of, do the reading and homework ahead of time and think about these clinical questions, and then let's talk about it.
And did that for you, Shireen, did that anything about the way the didactics are done change pre to post COVID?
Right. So now they're offered by Zoom. We do a lot of them by Zoom. They used to always be in person. And everybody would get together and eat their lunch together and have a chit chat. And, that was all nice, but we do it all by Zoom largely now, partly due to space restrictions, partly due to the fact that, people are in different places and this seems to be a little easier. And partly due to just concerns over the last 2 years about everybody sitting in a room all together and certainly not eating.
Yeah. Not even taking a sip of the coffee. Anybody else want to share?
I don't mind sharing what we're doing at Beth Israel in Boston. Kind of similar. We used to all be in person, and we have always had the small group discussions using the APGO materials, the videos, and asking the students to prepare with those. We have another set of didactics that is clerkship rounds, what we call it, and that's where the students are teaching the group. So I think we've pretty much kept that. We've gone to virtual. I think our biggest challenge now, as we try to work, I don't know, backwards, but it seems like, is some of the students are off-site. We still want, it's primarily virtual, but some of the students are on site and then, finishing their clinical day, trying to get to didactics at the end of the day. And we need to give them a place to sit, a place to be able to zoom in. We've had issues with space, just space in general. I think everybody is. But then at the same time, one of those challenges is like having one student in the room and then most of them on Zoom and the faculty trying to engage both groups. So that's been, I think, the biggest challenge, is trying to figure out how to make that hybrid discussion work best for everybody, and for the faculty person to, feel that they're reaching both groups and engaging both groups. Because as you know, everybody can sit on Zoom with their cameras off. And so unless we have specific faculty who have learned how to make the best of this, and then they'll call out, okay, I'm going to call in Shireen, and even with the video camera off, they will engage them that way and kind of force them into the discussion. But it seems to work well. But that seems to be where we are. Some faculty do that well. Some faculty just find it frustrating. So
yeah.
Happy
So
to
when
hear
you say,
everybody's thoughts.
I think you mentioned your students doing some flipped classroom type stuff. Are they teaching about cases or topics, or how do you guys approach what the students present?
So we're giving them the autonomy to pick a topic. It's not pre-assigned. We ask them to find, if they had to look up something, if they had to do a little extra research, what we say is chances are your classmates would have to do the same thing. So bring that research to the didactic session. We try to keep it informal and low pressure. But we have told them, please have like 2 to 3 takeaway points for your classmates. And that seems to have made it high yield, so that everybody walks away with something.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else want to share?
I can share what we do at Cincinnati. Like you guys, we use the APGO cases. We try to do a case-based learning sort of flipped classroom with all of our sort of 20-ish students together. And we'll assign 2 or 3 of the cases for a 2-hour session, and they do 8 of those sessions throughout the 6-week clerkship. So it ends up working out to a little bit more than once a week. And really the students work through the case, and then there's a faculty facilitator who's there to answer questions and sort of make sure people are on the right track, and sort of direct if people get off course. We do 7 of the 8 virtually. I'm lucky as the clerkship director, I have the discretion to do one of them in person. And then we tack on some suturing and knot tying practice in person to that 8th case. That is the one that I do, which it ends up being 2 cases in a 2-hour time span.
That's great. I feel like with the virtual stuff, that like hands-onness of students and you being in the same place and doing knot tying and stuff is something I miss. Anybody else? All right. Well, STK can talk about what was honestly her brainchild at the beginning.
Sometimes they say it's better to be lucky than good. And I think that that's kind of what happened with this curriculum that I sort of put together. I had just taken a really interesting course about creating learning material for your learners, sort of to give them to digest material in a lot of different formats. And so I was planning to sort of put this together, and then had sort of lined up the resources and had a student that was going to help me build it. And then COVID happened and I was like, perfect, look at that. So it really was just lucky. But sort of similar kind of when COVID hit, we needed a way to make it really virtual. And we had been using a case-based curriculum, but not the APGO one specifically. But we knew that we felt like we could make it better and help students prepare for it better. And then, you know, as you can see here, there's good data as well that when you flip the classroom, the students are more engaged. And we had heard some feedback that when our faculty members led the session, sometimes they like just kind of wandered off into like random corners and very specific things. And the students were like, this doesn't really apply. And so we also felt like by flipping the classroom, we would be able to really keep it focused on those nuggets that the students need and not kind of what the attending's agenda was. And also for those of you that have sat in a 2-hour Zoom didactic where just one person talks at you and like just want to poke your eyes out, we felt like by having different students lead, it would just be a little bit more popcorny and allow just more engagement from the students. And so we chose to base our curriculum, I chose just off case files because when I inherited the clerkship, that's what they were using. And to give a nod to APGO, I didn't really know about all of their resources at the time, and so hadn't engaged in the APGO cases. But the nice thing about case files is it has a lot of different cases in it. Some of the cases actually kind of accidentally cover more than one topic. And you can sort it by case or by topic, like OB versus GYN. There's lots of different things in there. And it does align really nicely with the APGO objectives. And I think you could do it with any, you could take kind of this idea and put it with the APGO cases as well. But what was really important, and Lorene sort of touched on this, wasn't just that we had a curriculum that covered the APGO objectives, which obviously needs to be at the heart of it, but that we were addressing a diverse group of learners who are really learning in different ways. And so we wanted to be sure that we presented them with material, not just the core of this is the case you're going to review, but also other ways to digest that material that made sense if you weren't someone that learned well by cases or you weren't someone who learned well by reading out of a book. And that's where we used, we pulled in these other resources, all of which are kind of free and online. And we did really lean heavily on the APGO topic videos, the APGO basic science videos. Flame is a really cool resource that stands for something like 5-minute lectures, advancing medical education. They were put together by a group at UCI, originally a resident who's now an attending there, and are geared actually as a resource for residents to teach medical students on the fly. So they're supposed to be about 5 to 10 minutes pre-made PowerPoints that are very high yield. And then a couple, you know, our learners are so audiophilic. Anyway, sometimes reading a paper doesn't work for them, but listening can be really helpful. And so we also linked the content in the various cases to some medical student and resident level podcasts. Again, just as a different way for learners to read. And then UCSF came out with this remote didactic series, which if you haven't seen is basically national experts teaching about topics. And I do warn my students, these are a little bit above what they need to know, but they're very well done didactics that came out a couple years ago. And then for topics that weren't so well covered in these, we put in some practice bulletins and linked to the common clerkship textbooks.
So we describe all of those resources that SDK just went over to the students so that they sort of know what everything means. And then this is what we give to the students. So similar, I think, to Jane from Cincinnati, we sort of split up the cases over we have 8 weeks for our clerkship at Wake. So over 8 weeks, we split up all the cases, and 2 to 5 students per week present a case, and we assign them one case. Like you can see case files 28 is prenatal care. And then we actually just give them the resources that match up with their case. So they don't have to go searching for them. They just have to go to the resources, again, using the APGO videos and the basic science videos, and then those other resources that we talked about.
Jess, can I just add one thing that
Please.
I always emphasize that I think is really important? Sometimes I put up this list in my orientation and my students' eyes get really big of like, oh my God, I have to digest all this material, and it feels super daunting. And so I really emphasize in my orientation that this is not meant that you need to read all of this, and please don't. This is meant to give you different ways to look at the same thing, whatever fits your learning style best. And I think that piece is really important when you're thinking about helping a diverse group of learners and also not overwhelming your learner.
Yeah, I always present a little bit like, I mean, I don't know that wellness necessarily should always be like accomplishing your work while being well, but I, mention that the point of this is to be able to do it in different ways. Listen to a podcast while you're walking or whatever, watch a video, approach it from different angles. Sorry, go ahead, Jess.
And I think what Lorraine said, that, this was SDK put all of this together. So she put in the work of actually matching all of the cases with the different resources that match that topic. So, and we're going to provide this to you all, but it's all there for you. So when she handed it over to me so graciously, I was so thankful that I did not have to repeat the work that she had done already. And again, this is just showing more examples of the different cases from case files and the resources that are available that they can use if they want. And again, not meant to use all of them, but looking in different ways. And then this is how we, with Lorraine and I, again, we sort of had the same group of students. So our weeks are the same. We have 8 weeks, and this is how we split ours up. So say week 1 and 2, OB and prenatal care basics. So we have, 4 to 8 cases that are all OB related. And again, just we grouped them by week and have cases that match that topic.
Oh, this is still you. Sorry, Jess.
I think, yeah, same thing. This is just more if you want to see, we showed some OB, and then this is our GYN examples. Again, showing there's these other resources have, great little information. They have other resources that are really great for the students to use to present their case.
And this is in the materials that are attached to the session. And these are all hyperlinks within a document that take you to the place, at least as long as all the links are still functional, which I think most of them are. So the students get it from our clerkship page with, these are the cases that are going to be covered in that week. And then these are the resources. At our site, so we're a remote, a regional campus of Wake Forest, and we're new. We used to be a regional campus of UNC. And so our students and the Wake students WebEx together to do these couple hour blocks of presentations. But we also do teaching on each of our services, and as a way to kind of provide residents and faculty with a little bit more resources for that on the fly on the service teaching, we then divided the remaining cases. So because it's 8, we do it with 8 weeks and just a few of the case files, we took all the rest of the cases of that are in case files, and then actually made up some additional cases and grouped them by kind of service. In our case, these are the services that our students rotate on: OB days, OB nights, GYN, and actually don't have outpatient on here, but outpatient and GYN onc, and then divided up the cases that way. So that essentially for faculty development in reviewing this, we've said, okay, here are the cases on GYN that are not covered in the group sessions. And so, we'd really like to target getting those things taught to students. And so here are resources for each of them. So again, weaving in kind of from these main different platforms, resources for them. And then saw a need for some LGBTQIA sort of cases and teaching and putting together essentials for that in multiple places. And that falls on, we include that with every service, since obviously that can impact every different service. So in the PDF, which is uplinked, which you guys have, there's like hyperlinks in there so you can jump around within the curriculum by teaching service and these additional modules. And then of course our vision would be that we'd be able to continue to grow this over time by adding, as new Flame, new Creogs over Coffee, new APGO topic videos come out, adding those things, and then also adding other cases to fill in things that are not well covered. So I think we have talked about most of this, but basically the idea being that you can use it for self-study or in groups, you can do it in person, Zoom, or hybrid. So, we've had students who have to go out on quarantine, but they can still come in. And then I think we've pretty well talked about how we use it with Wake Forest and Atrium. SDK, can you talk about how you use it actively now?
Yeah, I mean, we use it in a very, very similar way to the way Wake and Atrium are using it. Our students sign up for the topic that they want to cover or they want to present. And we have an additional document, which I'll make sure gets uploaded, but it's sort of a guide for our learner about how to put together like a case presentation so that when they're presenting it, it's a little bit more organized and they're hitting the high stuff. And then we're just doing it we have an 8-week block, but each student has a 2 weeks of elective that's non-Ob-Gyn at some point during that. And so we record all of our Zooms, we post them in our shared learning site, which is a Sakai site, so the students can go back and watch them for the weeks that they're not on our service. And they also put all of their PowerPoints or kind of whatever learnings whatever way they decide to teach their case, they put that in a shared file as well. So they can go back and use each other's PowerPoints or whatever kind of resource they use to teach the topic as well for teaching tools. And then we are almost all by Zoom, although occasionally I've had some groups that could be in person that were a little bit smaller that just used it in person and just taught live, which was really fun to teach live again and not on Zoom.
Jess, did you want to mention about what you do at the beginning to orient them to cases?
The only thing we do during our orientation day, we have like a half day where we have opportunity for lecture. So I actually present one of the cases as an example so that it comes off of what SDK gives to her students on how to present, but I just do one so that they feel comfortable when it's their turn.
And then, as I mentioned, I think there's this real onus on us to incorporate health equity modules into our clerkship. Our students have a separate health equity course, which is woven into the third year. And so this is certainly not the only thing that they do, but we are starting using some other resources to weave in health equity modules this year. And I wanted to just mention a couple of them, which are awesome free resources out there. Certainly nothing that we were involved in making, but happy to use. So one of them is this Innovating Education and Reproductive Health, and it's affiliated with the Ryan program and out of UCSF. And it is basically a platform with a curated free curriculum about sexual and reproductive health. So it has several different modules built into it, and students can register on the platform for free. Additionally, instructors, you can register as an instructor, and then you are able to when the student registers, they say they were referred by you, and then you're able to follow their progress through modules. So we are using the module that's called Structures and Self, Advancing Equity and Justice in Sexual and Reproductive Health. And it addresses structural determinants of health, social determinants of health, and their impact on health outcomes. And it's really like a learner-led, justice-informed curriculum that looks at how systemic racism and structural oppression in our country impacts health. And it's divided into 4 pillars. So this is the module that I'm having our students work through. And it's made of little video presentations. They're each about 5 to 7 minutes, and they're meant to provoke, students thinking and talking about these things. So the first pillar is about the legacy of structural racism in this country, and then the persistent structures of oppression that exist is the second pillar. The third is really talking about implicit bias and the way that enters into our everyday lives and our lives as healthcare providers. And then the fourth pillar is really focused on taking action. So thinking about how you at your institution or individual level can make tiny changes, even just a week's time. And as I mentioned, you can create this login so you can chart the structures. So each of the pillars is about 5 to 7 minutes. I saw Jane asked about how much time it would take. And so the video vignettes are short, and certainly I think a student could work through the whole thing in an hour to an hour and a half. But also I think it works well to divide it up into smaller chunks. So I'm doing that some with when meeting with the students regularly, just talking a little bit about each of the pillars. I haven't even, honestly, the Innovating Education in Reproductive Health has all of these different modules, all of which are amazing. This health equity one is the one I've spent the most time with, but it's a great website to check out and look around. And then another such resource, and again, there are multiple of these, but this one comes from MedEd Portal. I was just looking at MedEd Portal recently, and there's more than one of these microaggression modules that are on there, which are great for talking about modules. And MedEd Portal, if you haven't poked around in it a lot, is awesome. It's a free sourced option with lots of materials from different places. All of the materials that are uploaded there have been peer reviewed. And this is a module which is designed to define and identify microaggressions, discuss the intention of microaggressions versus the impact that they have, help students and faculty identify strategies to interrupt microaggressions as they're happening, and to reflect on empathy and awareness and understanding of impact. So this is in the packets as well, and it is linked on the MedEd Portal. Basically, on the MedEd Portal, you can download a zip file that has all of these things. And they wrote a paper about the pre and post survey responses from this, but it includes in it a facilitator guide. So you can do faculty development about how to facilitate these workshops, a workshop. The workshop contains cases of microaggressions. And it's interesting to read them because honestly, when you read them, you're like, oh yeah, this happens to me and to our students super regularly, whether it's the female student who is thinking about going into surgery and the discussion that mentors are having with her is around how they're going to be able to accomplish that when they already have 3 kids at home, or the female doctor who walks into a room and the patient thinks they're the nurse, or the Black student who's attending for the week doesn't make great eye contact with them and really bonds with the other student on service and tells the other student on service that they remind them of their daughter, and the downstream impacts of that. And then all of these scenarios, the students or group would work through and talk about identifying ways to approach the microaggressions and giving people really the tools of how to interrupt those when they're happening. And yeah, Jane said there was a great session on microaggressions earlier today. I'm gonna have to watch that on video. But so that resource is available on MedEd portal, as are many others, but just wanted to highlight that as part of the curriculum that we use. So we wanted to just see if you all think that these things could be useful for your clerkship or how you might integrate them. And then if there are other similar resources like this that you know that could be shared to address challenges that you have.
I feel like our group is bigger. Let's go into breakout rooms just because
that'd be great.
gives us a little bit chance to get to know each other. And so in your breakout room, introduce yourselves. We'll put these questions in the, I'll shoot them to the breakout rooms too. So we'll put you all into a couple different breakout rooms. And it's now 3:01, so we'll come back around like 3:10 or so. We'll give you a 1-minute warning.
Back.
Right.
Awesome. Well, this is one of the parts I'm most excited about, which is hearing from you all and kind of what you're using in your clerkship and what you think about these resources and anything else y'all talked about. So tell us what you got. Obviously, I'm from the South with my use of the word y'all every other second.
Does someone who was in the first breakout room 1 want to kind of share some take-home points or some of what you all talked about?
So that was me and Megan and Adriana. We talked about how this is amazing that you all are willing to share all of this, all of these resources. And what I was thinking is that we have these clerkship rounds, we have this peer teaching session already, but we don't assign topics and we let them kind of pick their own. But this might be a great way to incorporate this so that we're giving them the cases and we're giving them the resources. And it also would help with the fact that we've identified a few gaps in our didactics. And so this would be a great way to cover those gaps without asking faculty to work up a new lecture or something.
Renata, I love the way, I love that line of thinking, because that's part of kind of how we chose our cases, was based on gaps as well. And where we felt like the students were seeing things really common clinically, we tried to focus on cases that were less common clinically. So I think that line of thinking makes so much sense and is a great strategy for a good way, an effective way to use our limited didactic time that we have as clerkship directors.
Does anybody from the other room want to let us know what you guys talked about?
So both Amy and I are new clerkship directors as of, I think, this year. And so we talked about how nice it is to sort of have a curriculum that's sort of already mapped to LCME, deliverables basically. And that, having, like, both of us became clerkship directors in the time of COVID. So learning how to do didactics in the time of COVID and just learning how to be a clerkship director at the same time.
Yeah, I think, Jane, I was in the same boat. So this is actually my first year as the clerkship director. I was the assistant last year. But previous to switching over to this case-based curriculum, the old clerkship director was just doing like standard, like the students were presenting a PowerPoint and then faculty were giving lectures. And you're learning so much your first year as a clerkship director that I felt very overwhelmed at like switching to a case-based curriculum and how I was going to do that. So when SDK was shared this, I was like, oh, this takes such a load off to be able to just use this. And I basically used it exactly as she created it. It was very easy to adapt and sort of revamp what our students were doing. So hopefully you guys will be able to also.
we were talking while you guys were broken out about the APGO cases. And so the fact that they're mapped to the objectives is awesome. And also they're updated regularly. And it sounds like recently updated for inclusive language and those sort of things. I think case files, the like writing after the vignettes has a little bit of like, think about the differential this way, or think about why you might do this or that, which is a plus and a minus. Like sometimes it's helpful. Some of them say some weird things or things that are like not any longer true, which we're always trying to point out to the students. But I think that this type of thing could be done with any kind of case-based curriculum from wherever you get the cases, but collating up resources about the cases. And yeah, Amy, I'll show you. So attached to our session at the very end here, I'm going to like switch my screen share and show you what we uploaded to the session. The cases that we use are cases straight out of case files. And because that's copyrighted information, I did not copy it into the sessions. However, I will say that case files can be accessed freely on the internet. Someone has a PDF of it uploaded on the internet. Hypothetically, I've seen that. Not
perhaps if you just Google OB/GYN case files PDF, it may or may not pop
Maybe.
up. It's not us. We did not do that, but it does. You know.
Yeah. But yes, the idea is that it could be used. Anybody. I also we wanted to point out so that if you have resources like this that you want to share, you can email them to us and we can have them uploaded with the session. And then also, if you guys are not familiar, this DR-Ed listserv, which is, I think it's out of the University of Michigan, but anyway, there is a listserv and you can subscribe to it by sending an email message to this group with subscribe DR-Ed and your first name and last name. And it's not just OB/GYN, it's all different medical education people, but it's really interesting and useful. Now, it does put out a lot of email messages a day, and sometimes they're just like, we're trying to find a new dean of whatever, but it is very useful as far as I don't know, staying up to date on conferences and things that are happening and what people are doing in other specialties. I'm going to switch my share here, maybe.
I'm also going to put our emails in the chat. They're also, I'm a part of the APGO program, and you can message us in the Whova app, or you can email any of us. I think all of us are relative. It's weird to say that I'm the most senior of the three of us, having been a clerkship director now a whopping 3 years. But I think we all walked that like first year, like kind of stuff, and are happy to like problem solve or share or just be like a therapy support group for how hard it is to be a new clerkship director.
big push for the clerkship director school that APGO puts on. So
yes.
I got asked to be the clerkship director when I had been there like 10 minutes, and it was like a life goal, but not an immediate life goal. And it was the year before APGO clerkship director school was in Maui. So I was like, I will do it if I can go to the clerkship director school. And it's in Hawaii next January. But anyway, so it's great. It's great anytime, whether it's in Hawaii or not. But at any rate, this is the thing that we uploaded includes these slides, but then includes these supplemental materials. And I tried to put in like little links in here so you can easily see. So like the 8-week curriculum that we have used is divided up into the week 1 and 2 is prenatal care basics. And these are the cases, and you can't see the cases, but you can see, the subject matter about which the cases are. And then let's see. So I have it, we have it as an 8-week curriculum using select cases, and then as a case-based curriculum by like just subject matter. This is how I was talking about the extra cases, and we have them divided up by subject matter. And then, sorry, this is not an efficient way to do this. And then all of the cases in order. So these are all of the cases from case files in order. with all the things that we have. And then, you know, I've said this numerous times to these other ladies, but my life dream would be to have some very savvy med student help me create like an app where you could continually update the resources associated with the subject matters. I myself am not that level of savvy. Well, we're about 5 minutes early. Anybody else have any other thoughts or things you'd like to share or ask about?
The other thing we talked about in our group with Jane and Amy was that, Sarah, you mentioned gaps. And, you know, this is also something you can plug and chug for students who are quarantined, you know, for COVID, or for students who are out for some other reason, whether they have a family emergency or a different type of illness or something else. You know, none of us really have the time or the space or the energy to find remediation for these students. That's kind of what we talked about in our group. And so it would be nice to be able to say, okay, you missed this much time. This is what you missed, or this is what we'd like you to complete. And then you can kind of say that they met the objectives of your curriculum and they don't have to come back.
Shireen, I just had an idea, which maybe you can take back to UMEC, which is maybe we need like a clerkship school 401. It is like, you know, 2 to 3 years after you do clerkship director school, where you come back and like, these are our challenges. How do you deal with them? And these are our resources. Because when you do it when you're early, I don't know, you don't even know what you don't know. Totally.
That's exactly what
Oh
Adriana
yeah, please
said.
time it perfectly for the Maui visit.
Yeah,
the next Maui.
It's in Maui every 5 years. So
that would be perfect.
Let's start working on that now. I'll bring that back. Christy, take note. I'll bring that back to UMEC for sure.
But seriously, I think, yeah, I don't know. The resource of APGO and other clerkship directors is so helpful just in learning things.
Use your friends, everyone. Use your friends.
I was just going to add to what Shireen was saying about remediation, because we've had a few students fail the shelf recently, and we're trying to get them plugged in with tutors and that sort of thing. And this would be a great way for them, because they're usually retaking the shelf sometime later and maybe months later. So this would be a great resource, I think, for those students too.
That's such a good point, Renata, because then they're hysterical, right? Because they failed a shelf. Oh, they failed shelves at Harvard. I didn't know that. But, you know, you do get that report from the clerk, you know, from the shelf, and you can kind of identify areas of weakness and then plug and chug with this curriculum. That's a great idea.
All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I hope everyone has an excellent Friday. Good to see everyone's faces.
Nice job, everyone. We'll see you back in I guess we're done for the day. Yes, we're done for the day. And we have another day. Yeah, next Friday. We'll see you back next Friday.
Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.